I don't think there has been or there is a more challenging and the most complicated subject than that of consciousness, our own self, who we are, why do we feel what we feel, are we a soul trapped in a body, or are we just a body and the body itself giving rise to this feeling of consciousness. These are some of the simplest and yet most profound questions that you can ask. And you can go to philosophers, scientists everywhere. You won't find a really satisfactory answer because the question has been explored, but hasn't been answered perfectly. Which is why the book I'm going to talk about today, it's called The Nature of Consciousness. It's written by Rupert Spira and it contains essays on mind and matter and the subject of consciousness. What is it really? There's also an introduction by Deepak Chopra, and I can't tell whether that makes you feel better or worse about the book. But I would say that since the subject itself is so fascinating and worth exploring, you should give it a read. And today, in this podcast, I will read some pages from this book which particularly talk about and introduce you to the hard problem of consciousness. What is it really? And in very simple terms, the author lays out his argument. And he first makes us understand what are we dealing with here. So, without any delay, let me start. Our world culture is founded upon the assumption that reality consists of two essential ingredients, mind and matter. In this duality, mind is considered the primary element, giving rise to the prevailing materialistic paradigm in which it is believed that mind or consciousness, the knowing element of mind, is derived from matter. How consciousness is supposedly derived from matter, a question known as the hard problem of consciousness, remains a mystery and is indeed one of the most vexing questions in science and philosophy today. Strangely, the fact that there is no evidence for this phenomenon is not deemed significant enough to dissuade most scientists and philosophers from their conviction that consciousness is a derivative of matter. Although more and more are beginning to question it, most still believe that with advances in neurology, the neural correlates of consciousness and the means by which it is derived from the brain will sooner or later be discovered, and this belief is reinforced by the mainstream media. However, until such time, the hard problem of consciousness remains an uncomfortable dilemma for exponents of the materialist paradigm. Ironically, in all other fields of scientific research, such lack of evidence would undermine the premise upon which the theory stands. But in a leap of faith that betrays the irrational nature of materialism itself, the conviction at its heart is not undermined by the lack of supporting evidence, nor indeed by compelling evidence to the contrary. In this respect, the prevailing materialistic paradigm shares many of the characteristics of religion. It is founded upon an intuition that there is a single universal and fundamental reality, but it allows belief rather than experience to guide the exploration and therefore the implications of that intuition. Some contemporary philosophers go further than believing consciousness to be an epiphenomenon or secondary function of the brain. In an extraordinary and convoluted act of reasoning, they deny the very existence of consciousness, claiming it to be an illusion created by chemical activity in the brain. In doing so, they deny the primary and most substantial element of experience, consciousness itself, and assert the existence of a substance, matter, which has never been found. In fact, it is not possible to find this substance on the terms in which it is conceived, because our knowledge of matter, and indeed all knowledge and experience, is itself an appearance within consciousness, the very medium whose existence these philosophers deny. Such an argument is tantamount to believing that an email creates the screen upon which it appears, or even worse, that the email exists in its own right, independent of the screen whose very existence is denied. For many people, the debate as to the ultimate reality of the universe is an academic one, far removed from the concerns and demands of everyday life. After all, reality is whatever it is, independent of our models of it. However, I hope that this book will show clearly that the materialist paradigm is a philosophy of despair and conflict, and as such, the root cause of the unhappiness felt by individuals and the hostilities between communities and nations. Far from being abstract and philosophical, its implications touch each one of us directly and intimately. For almost everything we think, feel, and do is profoundly and for the most part subliminally influenced by the prevailing paradigm in which we have been raised and now live. As long as we continue to seek the source of happiness on the part of individuals and peace amongst communities and nations from within the existing materialist framework, the very best for which we can hope is to find brief moments of respite from the general trend of experience that is growing ever more divisive. However, there have been epochal moments in history when the collective intelligence of humanity could no longer be contained within the parameters that had evolved over the previous centuries for the purposes of advancing it. The cultural forms that evolve precisely to develop, refine, and express humanity's growing intelligence are at some point no longer able to accommodate it and become the very means by which it is stifled. The beliefs in a flat earth and a geocentric universe are two such examples. The idea of a flat earth that prevailed in the ancient world was challenged by Pythagoras in the 6th century BCE, but it took another 2000 years for his spherical earth model to be fully accepted by all cultures. Likewise, the idea of a heliocentric universe was first suggested by as early as the 3rd century BCE, but it was nearly 2000 years before the Copernican revolution that would make it mainstream. In each case, a belief that had served humanity's evolution thus far subsequently became the very means of its constraint, but not without resistance. In each case, the prevailing paradigm was so tightly interwoven into the ways people thought, felt, acted, perceived, and related with one another, and so deeply inculcated into the fabric and mechanism of society itself that it took 2 millennia, more or less, for the last vestiges of these ideas to be erased. In this book, it is suggested that the matter model has outlived its function, and is now destroying the very values that it once sought to promote. I believe that the materialist paradigm, which has served humanity in ways that do not need to be enumerated here, can no longer accommodate its evolving intelligence. All around within ourselves and our world culture, we see evidence that the shell of materialism has cracked. The growing organism of humanity can no longer be accommodated within its confines, and humanity's struggle to emerge it's expressing itself in all aspects of society. Nor can its host, the earth, any longer survive its degradation and exploitation. However, it is no longer sufficient to tinker with the existing paradigm from within its parameters. A new paradigm is required to definitely address the despair and sorrow felt by individuals, the conflicts between communities and nations, and humanity's relationship with nature. Most revolutions seek to modify the existing state of affairs to a great or lesser degree, but leave the fundamental paradigm upon which they are predicated intact. In this book, another kind of revolution is suggested, one that strikes at the basic assumption upon which our knowledge of ourselves, others, and the world is based. It is the revolution to which the painter Paul Cézanne referred when he said, "The day is coming when a single carrot, freshly observed, will trigger a revolution." It is the revolution to which Max Planck, developer of quantum theory, referred when he said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness." It is the revolution to which James Jeans referred when he said, "I inclined to the idealistic theory that consciousness is fundamental and that the material universe is derivative from consciousness, not consciousness from the material universe. In general, the universe seems to me to be nearer to a great thought than to a great machine. It may well be that each individual consciousness ought to be compared to a brain cell in a universal mind." It is the revolution to which Carl Jung referred when he said, "It is not only possible but fairly probable even that psyche and matter are two different aspects of one and the same thing." This revolution is an inner one and addresses the very core of our knowledge of ourselves, upon which all subsequent knowledge and understanding must be based. This book does not explore the implications of this revolution in anything but the broadest terms, but its ramifications touch every aspect of our lives. It is my experience that the implications of the consciousness-only model that is suggested in this book continue to reveal themselves long after the initial insight or recognition itself, gradually colonizing and reconditioning the way we think and feel, and subsequently informing and transforming our activities and relationships. It is for each of us to realize and live these implications. The consciousness-only model is not new. All human beings are at the deepest level essentially the same. Therefore, there must be a fundamental knowledge of ourselves that transcends the local temporal conditioning that we acquire from our cultures and thus share with all humanity, irrespective of our political, religious, or ideological persuasions. Aldous Huxley referred to this as the perennial philosophy. That is, the philosophy that remains the same at all times, in all places, under all circumstances, and for all people. In the East, the Sanskrit term Sanatana Dharma refers to the same essential eternal truths that transcend all culturally bound beliefs and customs. Sanatana Dharma, the perennial philosophy, has been available since the dawn of humanity and has appeared in many different forms and cultures throughout the ages, each culture lending its own particular characteristics to it, but never fundamentally changing its original understanding or its essential message for humanity. Nevertheless, in acquiring the local, temporal conditioning of the cultures in which it appeared, the perennial understanding not only acquired new forms, which is a necessary and inevitable outcome of the transmission of knowledge, it was also inadvertently mixed with ideas and beliefs that belonged to the specific cultures in which it arose and was as such modified and diluted to a greater or lesser extent. Even in those cultures in which its essential meaning was not modified or diluted, it was often not fully understood and as a result was wrapped in a shroud of mystery, which, while superficially bearing the hallmarks of wisdom, concealed and sanctified this misunderstanding. This book is also, of course, subject to and a product of the conditioning of the culture and language in which it was written, although the essential understanding that is expressed transcends cultural and linguistic conditioning. However, it is my hope that its conditioned form will serve to clarify rather than mystify, obscure or dilute the essential understanding that lies at the heart of the perennial philosophy. I hope in this way to bring the non-dual understanding out of the closet of dogma and esotericism and reformulate it in a way that is accessible to those who seek understanding, peace, fulfillment, and friendship beyond boundaries, who do not feel the need to affiliate themselves with any particular group, tradition, or religion, and who have become wary of referring to any doctrine, authority, or institution at the expense of their own direct experience. In this book, it is suggested that consciousness is the fundamental underlying reality of the apparent duality of mind and matter, and that the overlooking, forgetting, or ignoring of this reality is the root cause of both the existential unhappiness that pervades and motivates most people's lives and the wider conflicts that exist between communities and nations. And conversely, it is suggested that the recognition of the fundamental reality of consciousness is the prerequisite and a necessary and sufficient condition for an individual's quest for lasting happiness and at the same time the foundation of world peace.